Tesla says a new Cybercab will roll off its line every 5 seconds. That number is the one everyone keeps repeating. But here's the part almost nobody is asking about. What happened to that car in the next 5 hours? Right now, rows of finished glossy gold Cybercabs are sitting parked outside Giga Texas, not moving, while people who placed an order months ago are still refreshing their inbox for a VIN number that never shows up. If you've watched every Tesla keynote and started wondering whether the fastest factory on Earth might be running straight into something it can't out-engineer, you're not wrong to wonder. A car built in 5 seconds still has to get on a ship. It still has to get charged. It still has to survive a fender-bender without turning into scrap. That's the part of this story nobody's telling you, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why building the car might turn out to be the easy part. The paradox sitting in the parking lot. Let's start with a number that should stop you cold. A cycle time of 5 seconds works out to roughly 17,000 vehicles a day out of a single line, if Tesla ever hits it. Now, picture what has to happen to each one after it drives itself off the end of the line. It needs a buyer, a destination, a way to physically get there. That's where this story stops being about robots and starts being about something a lot less glamorous. Boats, the largest car-carrying ships in the world. The roll-on, roll-off vessels that move vehicles across oceans typically carry somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 cars per voyage, and a transatlantic crossing can take 2 to 4 weeks, depending on route and weather. Run the math against a factory producing 5 figures of vehicles daily, and a gap opens up between how fast Tesla can build a car and how fast the world can actually absorb one. This is the part of Tesla's ambition that never shows up on a keynote slide. Musk talks about 5-second cycle times and millions of robots, but shipping lanes don't care about quarterly guidance. A single storm delaying a port, a customs backlog, a shortage of car carrier capacity, and you get exactly the picture we opened with. Rows of finished cars sitting with nowhere to go. Analysts covering global shipping have raised exactly this concern, that if factory output keeps accelerating faster than logistics capacity worldwide, the bottleneck simply moves. It relocates from the assembly line to the harbor, and that's the trap hiding inside this entire story. Tesla spent a decade deleting steps from the factory floor. They collapsed 100 welded pieces into a single casting. They ripped out miles of wiring. Every one of those moves made the factory faster, but none of them touched what happens after the car leaves the building, and that part hasn't gotten any faster at all. That gap between factory floor speed and everything downstream of it is the real subject of this video. A car sitting in a lot isn't producing revenue, isn't feeding the robo-taxi network, and isn't doing its one purpose-built job. Speed on the line only matters if the rest of the system keeps up. And right now, nothing around that line moves anywhere close to 5 seconds. The 19-kilowatt problem. So let's talk about one specific piece of that downstream system, because it might be the most overlooked design decision in the entire Cybercab: how the thing actually gets charged. There's no charge port on this car. None. Tesla built the Cybercab around the idea that a robo-taxi can't plug itself into a wall. So instead, the car parks itself over an induction pad and charges wirelessly at roughly 19 kilowatts. On paper, that sounds elegant. No cable, no human, no fumbling with a connector at 3 in the morning. In practice, it comes with a trade-off that's easy to gloss over and hard to ignore once you look at the numbers. Wireless inductive charging is simply less efficient than plugging a cable in. Energy has to jump an air gap between 2 coils instead of flowing through a direct copper connection, and that gap generates heat, which is wasted energy. Wireless systems commonly lose 10 to 15% more energy than a wired connection, and they charge slower to begin with. Compare 19 kilowatts of wireless charging to the 250 plus kilowatts a supercharger delivers over a cable, and you understand why this matters for a car that's supposed to be working, not resting. Think about what that means for a robo-taxi supposed to be earning money nearly around the clock. Every minute parked on a charging pad instead of carrying a passenger is a minute it isn't doing its job. Tesla poured enormous capital into shaving fractions of a second off casting and welding steps, chasing efficiency at every station on the line. Then, at the end of that car's operating cycle, it can sit still for the better part of an hour just to top up a battery deliberately kept small to maximize efficiency per mile. This isn't a flaw that breaks the whole plan. Tesla clearly made a conscious trade. Simplicity and automation on one side, charging speed on the other. But if you're trying to run a fleet at maximum utilization, this is exactly the kind of quiet inefficiency that adds up. One car losing time to slow charging is a rounding error. A fleet of hundreds of thousands of cars doing it every single day is a very different number, and it's one no keynote about production speed ever mentions. Compare that to a human-driven Uber, where a driver plugs into a fast charger, grabs a coffee, and is back on the road in 15 or 20 minutes. A driverless Cybercab has no such flexibility. It has to drive itself to a pad, a line, and simply wait, earning nothing, for however long that induction system takes. The car that can't be fixed. Now here's the part of this story that should genuinely matter to anyone thinking about buying one of these vehicles, because it isn't just about robo-taxis. It's about what happens after a crash. Tesla's breakthrough rests on giant, single-piece castings, huge sections of a car's underbody poured as one solid piece of aluminum instead of assembled from dozens of stamped and welded parts. That's genuinely brilliant from a manufacturing standpoint. It's also created a real, documented headache in the repair industry. When 70 separate parts become one solid casting, a moderate collision that once meant replacing a single panel can now mean the entire casting is compromised, with no straightforward way to weld, bend, or patch a piece that large back into shape. Independent repair shops and insurance industry analysts have flagged this as a growing concern with large format castings across the industry, not just at Tesla. Repair costs on damage that would have been minor on a traditionally built car can climb dramatically, and insurers have sometimes leaned toward writing off a vehicle entirely rather than attempting a repair, simply because fixing a megacast structure isn't always practical. Add a structural battery pack into that same underbody, doubling as the car's floor, and the stakes of any impact nearby go up further. None of this means these cars are unsafe. It means repairable is quietly shifting, and a lot of buyers won't find that out until they're filing a claim after a crash that used to be a fender-bender and is now a total loss. A car engineered to be built in 5 seconds was never engineered with an easy repair in mind, and that tension is one the entire industry will have to sit with as more manufacturers copy this approach. Think about what that actually means if you're the one signing the loan. You could own a car worth $30,000, get tapped at low speed in a parking lot, and walk away with a totaled vehicle instead of a body shop bill, simply because the part that got dented happens to be cast as one piece with everything around it. Insurance premiums tend to follow repair costs upward over time, and a car built around fewer, bigger, harder-to-fix pieces is a very different actuarial bet than the car your parents drove. That's not a reason to panic. It's a reason to read the fine print before you assume efficient to build automatically means cheap to own. And here's where this stops being just a repair cost story and starts looking like something closer to a business model. Tesla already runs its own insurance arm, and it already runs its own lithium refinery and cathode plant on the Texas Gulf Coast. the same raw material that eventually becomes the next casting. Put those two pieces next to each other, and the incentives get uncomfortable fast. A company sitting on both ends of that pipeline, the decision that totals your car and the furnace that turns totaled aluminum back into new inventory, has very little reason to make that casting easier to fix. To be clear, Tesla hasn't confirmed any formal buyback and melt program for wrecked vehicles, and I'm not going to pretend I have proof of one. But the vertical integration is real, the incentive is real, and it's fair to ask whether a car this hard to repair is an engineering oversight or a decision that just happens to look like one. Why the line has no room for people. Let's move from the car itself to the people, or rather, the lack of them, standing next to the line, building it. Tesla has said outright that this new assembly line moves too fast for a person to safely stand near. And once you picture what that actually looks like, it stops sounding like a factory and starts sounding like industrial machinery nobody's meant to get close to. Elon Musk described it as looking more like a high-speed consumer electronics line than a car factory. At sub-10-second cycle times, robotic arms weighing hundreds of kilograms are swinging, gripping, and releasing at their mechanical limit, throwing off pressure waves with every pass and closing distances in a fraction of a second, faster than a human eye can track, let alone react to. This isn't a labor cost decision dressed up as a safety story. It's simple physics. Push a mechanical process fast enough, and human reaction time stops being a workplace inconvenience and becomes a single point of failure in the room. Tesla isn't clearing people off that floor because it doesn't value them. It's clearing them off because flesh and bone can't keep pace with a machine running at its absolute mechanical limit, where the margin for error is measured in milliseconds, not seconds. That's the opening Optimus is being built to fill. Tesla has talked about factories designed for 1 million humanoid robots a year, eventually scaling toward 10 million, replacing lines that used to build the Model S and X. Tesla isn't alone in this race. Hyundai, which now owns Boston Dynamics, has announced a factory aiming to build 30,000 Atlas robots a year by 2028, deploying them at its own Georgia plant around the same time. What sets Tesla's approach apart, at least on paper, is that Optimus shares the same cameras, computer, and neural network, already driving millions of Teslas on public roads. That's a genuinely different bet than a robot trained from scratch for one narrow factory task. But shared software doesn't erase the hardest unsolved problem in humanoid robotics, which, by Elon Musk's own admission, is the hands. Grasping, adjusting grip, manipulating small parts on the fly, the things a human hand does without thinking, remain the single hardest engineering challenge left. Harder, in his words, than the rest of the robot combined. The BMW Pilot is worth sitting with because it's one of the only real, sustained deployments of a humanoid robot on an actual production line anywhere. Over roughly 11 months, a robot from a company called Figure supported production of more than 30,000 vehicles and moved upward of 90,000 sheet metal components with millimeter-level precision on an 84-second cycle. That's the current real-world baseline for humanoid labor in a car factory. Tesla is talking about compressing that same work down under 10 seconds. That gap is worth sitting with, because it's the real dichotomy underneath this entire robot race. Figure's robot needed 84 seconds, a fixed task, and a human supervisor standing nearby just to place one piece of sheet metal. Tesla is asking Optimus to work inside a line built for cycle times under 10 seconds, with no fixed script and nobody standing close enough to intervene if something goes wrong. Musk himself has called the hands the hardest engineering problem on the entire robot. Harder than legs, harder than balance, harder than the software running it. So the real question isn't whether Optimus can walk around a factory floor. It's whether that kind of dexterity can mature fast enough to carry a 5-second line by the end of 2026, or whether Texas is quietly walking back into the same production hell Tesla lived through building the Model 3 at Fremont, just with robotic hands standing in where the conveyor belts used to be. Doing the math, nobody wants to say out loud. So let's put all of these pieces on the table at once, because this is where the real question of this video lives. Tesla's own numbers suggest a future where robot-staffed lines build robots, which then help build more cars, at speeds no human-paced assembly line has ever approached. If even a fraction of that materializes, output gets measured not in hundreds of thousands of vehicles, but in the millions, potentially rivaling the largest automakers on Earth, out of a handful of factories running around the clock without shift changes or sick days. That vision is worth taking seriously, because Tesla has a track record of eventually delivering on manufacturing breakthroughs, even when the timeline slips. But everything we just walked through, ports that can't move cars as fast as factories build them, charging pads that can't refill a battery as fast as a plug can, crash repair math quietly shifting more cars into the totaled column, and the safety boundary keeping workers away from the fastest part of the line, all points toward the same truth. Speed on the factory floor was never the hard part. It's everything wrapped around that speed, the ports, the grid, the insurers, the workforce, that decides whether any of this reaches the real world at the pace Tesla is promising. And that raises a question worth sitting with. If the factory outruns the ports, the charging infrastructure, and the workforce it's meant to replace, what's left for the rest of us inside that system? Is a self-replicating, robot-run factory an efficiency miracle, or a closed loop that quietly stops needing people, not just on the line, but in the economy built around it? That's the trap sitting underneath every 5-second headline. Building the car was never going to be the hardest part of this plan. The ports, the charging pads, the repair shops, and the human being standing just far enough back from the line, that's where this entire bet actually gets decided. And right now, nobody, including Tesla, has fully solved for it. So, here's the real question I want to leave you with. When a company can build faster than the world can absorb what it builds, does that make the company unstoppable? Or does it just move the breaking point somewhere we haven't been watching closely enough? Are you genuinely excited about a future this automated? Or does a factory that runs too fast for people to stand anywhere near it make you a little uneasy? Tell me honestly in the comments down below. I read every single one, and I genuinely, truly want to know which side of this you're standing on. If this kind of deep dive into how these machines actually work is your thing, hit subscribe right now, because this is only part 2 of a series pulling apart everything Tesla isn't putting in its keynotes. Next time, we're going straight into the robots themselves, what Optimus can and can't actually do on a factory floor today, and why Elon Musk himself has called the hands the hardest problem he's ever tried to solve. You will not want to miss that one. Hit that bell so you don't. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.